No one. No one comes back to open the door. No one. It's a strange sensation. But my guess is that is how life often lacks animation. Somewhat numb. A little bit past tense. Yesterday life. I don't, at least until recently, I wouldn't agree, but perhaps after all, nowadays, yeah. One need to appreciate the small things. Life's small things. But whose small things? And who is to decide when what a small or a big thing is? Are things that are for free smaller than things that come with a price? Luxury items are often quite small. Except for maybe yachts and mansions, but they are a little bit useful, so it doesn't really count as proper luxury. It's interesting though to observe how luxury goods almost exclusively entertain a very strong position in secondary markets. One would think that would be, to obtain something, to acquire something that the very moment when you have it in your hand, it decreases value in a flash. Like fireworks. To invest in fireworks. Usually. And then 30 seconds later, it's all gone. In comparison to a diamond necklace that, including index regulation, will maintain its value for generations. Thousands of years maybe. Or to get oneself an exclusive apartment, a luxury condo that the real estate broker convinces you will double its value in a couple of days. That's pretty something. Fireworks. Then again, there is something about luxury really doesn't go together with spectacular. It needs to be practiced with a certain kind of indifference, a sort of a je ne sais quoi. See if I could care less. Otherwise, no. Things for free seems to attract less attention. And is that what makes them small? But somewhere it flips. After all, a gift is for free, but can I mean to obtain it, to acquire it, can be connected with a lot of value, even perhaps sacrifices. But the moment when it's passed over, that value must be neglected or pushed aside, because to maintain the status of a gift, there can be no assumed revenue or gratitude, neither for the person receiving the gift, also for him or her or them. It can't come out with a, oh, I have always exactly wished for that. Or, how did you know that that's what I want, that I've always wanted something like this? Or, oh, you shouldn't have, that's way too big, way too much. The gift must in a way be useless the moment of its passing. And it is first through a sort of collaborative practice that the thing, the gift, and the person develops a relationship, and there is where value is created. Children is perhaps the best and the worst example. They are, after all, for free, and the production value is rather minimal. At the same time, a child is understood to be the biggest gift life can offer. And well, they certainly don't come with a return policy. And it seems that it doesn't matter how many either. Like, it's not that practice wears out the value of any of them. Just small or big things have something to do with durability. The wristwatch the son inherits from his father, who inherited from yet another generation. The little thing obtained through choices against life's excesses, signifying reliability, loyalty, and commitment. You stood up for, you held the fortress, durable, and at the same time, a little thing that holds and presents life's lack of permanence. An inherited wristwatch, a small, big thing, and a big, small thing. And never a middle-sized thing. At some point, it was rather commonplace, but today, who keeps a job for several decades, maybe we have lost the ability to practice loyalty, or perhaps our societies has transformed in ways that has made commitment incompatible. Or perhaps it's just capitalism that has grown so greedy that it can't even offer us frequent flyer members. A sign of gratitude towards the end. She gave me a kiss. A kiss can be a really tiny thing, but a certain one can change a life, or two or many. When after that first one, they couldn't stop. And still, that first one pays the bills for all the following ones. But then we ran out of kisses. Stopped. Maybe we got bored. Perhaps we grew too self-conscious about the possibility of bad breath or. But then what happens then with the kiss? Does it end up in a malignant inflation? Or does the rare kiss still exchanged grow exponentially in value to be something really big? We remember our first kiss, maybe several, the one behind the That one was really surprising. I really didn't see that coming. That one that I longed for such a long time. A couple somewhat disappointing, but perhaps mostly because oversized expectations due to too much fantasizing. And then that one that changed everything. That made everything prior absolutely futile. It changed everything. I wonder towards the end of life, will I remember the last? I wish, I truly wish that the distance, the journey between the last kiss and my last breath will not be long enough to get lost. And the time between them, the last kiss and my last breath, will not be long enough for forgetting. We say she outlived her husband with 20 years. But do we then also say she endured life, 20 years of life, without the luxury, without the privilege, without the gift of giving somebody a kiss? Or for that matter, to be on the receiving end, to surrender to a kiss. God welcomes everybody. His house is open to all of us, sinners and criminals included. On the door there's a big sign saying "Tout est gratuit." There's no entrance fee. And then you're supposed to cultivate your relationship with God. But isn't it strange and peculiar that at the same time as God is for free and we would object if there was a ticket price, still we get upset or annoyed when he or she or they, when they don't appreciate our prayers, when we don't feel heard. But isn't it, after all, how if something is for free, can we simultaneously expect remuneration, to be offered something in return, that there will be some sort of payback? It's not rocket science. Everybody, we know that there's no interest rate to for free. And everybody knows that a Luna Park with a fat entrance fee, the ferries will be bigger and the haunted house more cinematic and, high tech. But when it comes to God, we seem to have forgotten this little predicament. And does that make faith and my relation to God is a small thing? A small relation with a big thing. Maybe it would be I've always been told, it was a teaching that God is humongous. He is the creator of everything and can therefore not be huge. But maybe it would be better if it was a big relation with something small. That it is due to my commitment, to my compassions and devotions. That it's a big relation with a small thing. But because of how I undertake my relation, the small thing is maintained and sustained. It is, after all, a little bit peculiar that if God is part of all of us and we are all part of God and God is everything, it would be a little bit odd if she, he or they would charge themselves an entrance fee, wouldn't it? But I can wait. I can wait. She asked me to hold her hand. It must have been in the second half of May. As a request, a small thing. For the one being asked, it might mean next to nothing. Sure you can, why not? Let's try. But for the one asking, it might be connected with an immense effort, a huge risk. To overcome shyness or to master the bravery of possibly being rejected. And evidently the response can change the course of 2 lives to come. A child who slips its hand into mine without hesitation, without conditions, a small thing. And every time something so overwhelming, a small request, and a really big thing, a gift, whose size cannot really be measured, and something that I have to take on without any form of consideration in regard to responsibility and morals. But I can wait. I can wait. There at the end of the fence. Nor responsibility nor morals are, nor can wait. In fact, they're really bad at waiting and might even be the exact opposite. But I can wait. I can wait. At the end of the fence. Is waiting a small thing? For the bus, it's usually not very long, but it can feel like a big thing. For love, one can wait forever, but such waiting must not be a big thing, at least not be understood as an effort, especially not a big effort. Because, I mean, if it's love, and then it cannot be an effort. When it's felt like an effort, then perhaps it's nothing more than a bus that it's really delayed. But when that waiting that must not be an effort, but be done with a little bit of whatever and ease, comes to an end, does it change size from big to small, or is it then like, that was that, let's move on? The person that I've been waiting for coming home from the war, or what have we, the residency in Switzerland. Oh, you've been waiting for me. As if waiting was an effort, some kind of endurance test. As if waiting would be some kind of competition. And then if this is the third time you're waiting, is then that a triathlon? Oh, but only 2.5 years. That's hardly nothing. Seems like anticipation is also playing a role here. And then there she or he is. What happens to the time of waiting then? Until the moment of your return, I have counted the days, the hours, even minutes. I have with closed eyes lain sleepless, wondering, longing, worrying and fantasizing about the moment when we will again be reunited. But what is that time? What are those feelings and emotions now when they must be nothing now. When you are back, they can have no value. And yet all I had when you were away was the waiting and the anticipation of your return. Waiting was what kept me alive. Waiting resonates of passivity. Waiting by definition, well, maybe, or something like, maybe not really, but a little bit by definition. Waiting is the very opposite of suspense. Suspense is when postponed time is undulating, crisscrossed by creeks, rivers, pathways. When time is bumpy and interlaced, cracked like dry earth after an extensive drought. That's suspense. Waiting has nothing of such elaborations, no gaps to jump, no intervals to overcome. Waiting is the absence of details. It's not at all out of focus. No. All dials are meticulously calibrated and technologies are razor sharp. There are just no details, nothing that occupies. Perhaps that's why people tend to have a cigarette when they're waiting for a bus. It's a means to reinstall details. No, the cigarette, or the waiting is a means the cigarette is a form of disavowal. Smoking as a way to substitute a lack of details with manufactured ones, even though one knows that that's the very function of the cigarette. But is a detail an obstacle or an asset? Is something with a lot of details bigger, or are details part of something, that part of making something small? That's a detail we really don't need. But then, are any details necessary? Or do the details ensure that possibilities are still at hand? Details is a means to postpone permanence. There is definitely a difference between voluntary and involuntary waiting. Think about. And then one day, the person that has been waiting tells you with one of those days when you might not be at your very best, tells you with a soothing and calm voice, "After all the time I was waiting for you, how could you?" How do you respond to something so big, so small, such an accusation. Maybe it's not the moment when you ping pong the comment back with a smile on your face, saying, well, I didn't exactly ask you, did I now? I don't know. But perhaps involuntary waiting is the same as grief. Or maybe grief is the specific form of involuntary waiting, when you can't stop waiting, although you know the waiting will never end. Grief is waiting without destination. And grief is life in which details are veiled. You can feel them, but as if through a veil. Almost as though we were wearing really, really thick winter gloves. Ghost details, perhaps. For every moment lived, an amount of future is subtracted. Young people have, maybe they don't possess it exactly, but young people have more future. To become old is a journey towards coming in terms with one's diminishing futures. It's kind of beautiful to think about the gentle realization that, oops, now my stack of futures have come to an end. Today I have arrived to the end of my futures, and it's time to wave you all goodbye. I stay put here, and you move on to your futures to come. But then what happens? What happens to all the unlived futures? The futures of those who died prematurely. Maybe what we call ghosts. Is the unlived futures of those too many who weren't allowed to see their stack of futures come to an end. But there's maybe one thing that can and mustn't be allowed, but can and mustn't, although asked the kind voice that can't be allowed, even if asked ever so kindly. And that is to skip over a part of the futures that we have been assigned. To I guess impatience precedes the moment of coming to terms with the awareness that one's futures are not infinite. The moment on the phone with who knows. But when are you coming? Oh, it's not long now. I'll be there in 2 days. And the person on the other end responds, I can't wait. I really can't wait. What a strange thing to say. But of course it feels good. And in a way you ought to. Even though everybody knows that you can wait. Of course you can. You won't die or you won't disintegrate. And if you did, the waiting would be in vain in the first place. Actually, it will be and cannot not be a delight to wait. Because what you're waiting for is an extraordinary something or somebody. Yet, if you don't wait, it's as if you don't care, that you are indifferent. An intricate twist. Moments in life when waiting grows and out of scale and to something so big it can't be held. Moments in life like when you are expecting the outcome of a job interview or perhaps the results of a series of clinical or medical tests. When waiting grows so painful that even if the outcome is negative, it will be a relief. Or when waiting for a crush to show up at a date, in seconds the waiting turns into awkward silences and staggering conversation. It's nothing personal. But I think I prefer if you're a little bit late. Perhaps not so little, because as long as you haven't arrived, you and me, we are perfect. It's not long now. I'll be there in 2 days. But I want 2 days to be long. Because every moment of waiting for you fills me with a gentle glow. Makes me brand new and I feel like freshly brushed teeth all day long. And sometimes it's when I don't know when you will arrive that I suffer. But sometimes I make sure to stay in that state as a form of whispering masochism is perhaps not really the word that I'm looking for, but that peculiar enjoyment of deliberately subjecting oneself to doubt. In many prominent Christian cultures, grief is something carried by the individual. We go through life together, whatever the weather. There's forms of solidarity, but with grief, you're on your own. I'm not an expert, but isn't it a little bit unfair, somewhat unfair, even stingy, to consider that we, as the last thing we do in life, the very last thing, we are obliged to appear in court to be judged by God? I mean, wouldn't you consider a generous God would forgive and forget? No, actually not forgive, just forget. Forget, in a cheeky and kind of under the eye way. I know that you know that I know, but I will still deny whatever it was, because to forgive still recognizes that something might not have been exactly as desired or up to standards. The father or parent that offers a child, well, maybe more likely a grown-up child, offer the kid a loan, even though they possess the assets and have no intention of spending them. Especially if accompanied with an offhand comment, you have to make yourself worthy. In particular, as the very last thing in life, there in front of, you have to make yourself worthy. How is it that one says, you learn as long as you learn from your mistakes? What an awful moral. But perhaps it's equally awful. You learn from the things you forgive. First, I need you to acknowledge that you did me wrong. Then I can, perhaps. Or, I forgive you, but only when I've seen you suffer the consequences of your actions. To forgive is, however noble, still an engagement in power and dominance. People that are proud of their ability to forgive, that swim in the self-righteous appearance of forgiveness, rectification. How utterly unattractive and proprietary. Forgiveness can or must not be private. It's rather a movement. No, it must not be private. It's rather a form of becoming public. Forgiveness is not something one receives nor is it something that one gives. It's not an action from one to the other. It's two or several individuals stepping away, withdrawing from themselves in favor of enveloping an entirety, of zooming out, and in that moment passing privacy, stepping out of privacy and becoming and practicing a form of commons. Maybe until 1776, forgiveness. But since then, forgiveness has been on the Trans-Siberian capitalism. And you know what? Already before it found its coach, it swapped forgive for transaction. Forgive became transaction. A terrible moment when forgiveness speaks. And by the way, what's in it for me? As if forgiveness was a good deal. But I need closure. Another of those, at least to me, American standards. And who came up with this? What kind of one-dimensional or no-dimensional therapist can that have been? I need closer before I can forgive. What an awkward reliance on reason. I need to understand to be able to follow causally step by step, and then perhaps an incredibly regulatory approach to loss, grief, and trauma. Can there not be anything else to it than to put it behind, to make something come to an end? Be done with it. Box it up and put it in a forgettable corner in the basement. Maybe there can be parallel opportunities, perhaps things can coincide, co-inhabit a landscape, not necessarily bumping into each other, but still forming and sharing a landscape. Forgetting, is not easy, because it cannot be active. Forgetting must be done without determination. And it's way more complex than for forgiving, especially for Americans, since there's no transactions involved. I mean, forgiving is bringing something to an end. And now we can go on. Whereas forgetting is to engage in movement, a dispersion, a concentric movement through which elements, fragments and parts gradually part from each other until a moment when semiotic coherence is lost. On the other hand, maybe forgetting is another word for passive aggressive or Forgetting is active forgetting is synonymous with repression. Proper forgetting has to happen in 2 steps. First, you have, still without determination, first you have to forget, then you have to forget to forget. First, after a second forgetting, when you are forgetting, when you have forgotten what you have forgotten, can I free myself from forms of exchange of guilt? Once I told a female friend, maybe more of an acquaintance, I can't remember the context or why, but it was at a party and it wasn't very late, so it wasn't like that. I told her this story, or I tried to, this story about a guy who had a kid in the same kindergarten as me. But before I had even come halfway through the story, she interrupted me in a very too loud voice. Yeah, but he just wanted attention. And then she let me know that the guy, that she might even have called the dude, and me, we were both losers, me especially, that had bored her with such a miserable, anecdote. I didn't say anything more, but not because I didn't want to, but because she had started to talk with somebody else already and about something else that apparently must have been much more relevant, but it appeared as the opposite to me. Now, anyways, the guy who had a child in the same kindergarten as me, the identifiable as a cultural entrepreneur, not an artist, but neither a manager, but you know the type, no? At times, anyway, he showed up in a fluorescent jacket, the kind of jacket that garbage handlers and city cleaners are obliged to wear, sort of too orange or some other unidentifiable color. Or if color is even what you can call that. And of course, attention is it's obvious. How could it be otherwise? Hello, here I am. Can you see me? Like a Jennifer Lopez. But through fragments of information and fragments of exchange, but never really an actual conversation. He sort of informed me, or perhaps better, he allowed me to understand that actually, the moment when he put on the jacket, he became invisible. Everything, from that moment, everything that mattered was the jacket. And he, although the jacket was a perfect size, he completely disappeared inside it. For him, the jacket offered a certain form of anonymity. Perhaps not with the really dark sides of becoming properly invisible or being subject to regulations. He could still pick up his child at the kindergarten. But as a human without content, not as a person, just a human, just human. certainly one could, of course, a form of privilege, and I believe he acknowledged this as well. But for him, there was something very, very, very. I mean, to be anonymous, is that smaller or bigger? Is that a small or a big thing? Isn't the conventional understanding that anonymity implies that something has been taken away, or reducted, or replaced? Maybe it's all Mark's fault. I mean, at home, off hours, spending time in nature, then you're a person and you have agency vis-a-vis your personality. At work, on the other hand, you're anonymous. You are alienated. You have been stripped of your possibilities, and now you're just one of endless many interchangeable anonymous workers. I was wondering about this spending time in nature, recharging your batteries. I always thought that point of nature was that nature is indifferent to me. Not to me, the human, not me, the animate being, putting weight on a certain spot on planet Earth, leaning against a tree, or watching the leaves flutter in the wind. To me, nature has no interest in confirming me, nor being confirmed by me. Nature is indifferent. So in nature you become anonymous, and it's a zone of not having to carry being yourself. Not in the sense of be yourself, but the opportunity to be just you, without Eigenschaften, without content, without decisions. On the other hand, maybe I can also regard anonymity to be the moment just before possibility. I mean, just before, in the sense of just before being identifiable as either possibly this or possibly that. Anonymity then is a moment of living all possibilities and impossibilities at the same time, without having to differentiate all of them at the same time all the time. Both possibilities and impossibilities. Anonymity is like the calm before the storm, the moment just before something starts to pick up speed. It's not implosion, it's neither explosion, it's without prefix, it's simply or just plosion. When something becomes possible, possibly this or possibly that, necessity is crossed out. Possibility is not necessary. It's possibly this or possibly something else. Anonymity, however weird it might sound, is to be necessary, to become necessary, but not necessarily this or that. Just necessary. I can wait. I really can wait. At the end of the fence. Possibility. Possibly this or that. Because possibility doesn't end. It goes on and on. It perpetuates. Possibility is the opposite of being real. Possibility is the absence of being genuine. To become anonymous is equal to becoming real. And maybe that's why we, or at least I, fear city cleaners and garbage workers to an extent, because anonymity neither communicates possibility nor asks for a choice, makes no propositions, and therefore make me experience my own possible anonymity, my own possible erasure. But becoming anonymous is not about, it has nothing to do with becoming erased. It's the opposite. It's becoming full, completed, completely full and fully completed, and without having to make any choices, especially not any choices in relation to anything or anybody. But I wonder, is possibility smaller or bigger than anonymity? Is possibility smaller or bigger than anonymity? Some say one doesn't choose love, but it's the other way around. Love chooses us. Maybe since I didn't make the choice, didn't decide for this or that, to love isn't a matter of possibility. Because if it was chosen for me, it cannot not be necessary. To love is simultaneously the fear and bliss of becoming anonymous. The fear connected to the withdrawal of possibilities. And the bliss connected to becoming one. To become completed. To be here and now without any form of choice, here and now, every moment and every moment, again and again. Love has no reasons, only necessity. So when I say, I love you, I'm given a short, perhaps just a really short, but I'm given an interval vis-a-vis possibility. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? That to love, possibly the most personal stuff we humans do, is at the same time something that doesn't and can't belong to us. To love implies to give oneself up a little, to renounce one's personhood. The I that love you is and isn't me at the same time. And it's never halfway. It is fully me and completely not me at the same time, at every moment, and all moments. If I had a reason to love you, if there was a rationale or justification, wouldn't that be somewhat melancholic and disappointing? I love you as long as you don't color your hair green, as long as you don't bring your pet turtle over, or at least avoid garlic. I love you as... No. Love reflects only itself, as itself. I love you because I love you. And love is because. And as long as I do, because. Love is necessary. And perhaps even objective. And if love is not my choice, and can't be, love can also not be private. To love implies to make oneself available and public. Does something become more true if expressed with a loud voice? My father used to say, let's speak lowercase, especially in the car. No screaming, just tiny letters. Or does the truth gain prominence when expressed through a whisper? Obviously, a secret. It's much more secret if it's whispered in somebody's ears. If something is true, it's true independently of the volume. So why holler when the whisper is more than enough? A truth is necessary. It has nothing to do with possibility. The truth doesn't belong to anybody. It's not even ours. But independent of humans and our lives, big or small. The truth is necessary. And has nothing to do with possibility. If love is not my choice, not me choosing possibly this or possibly that, but love is necessary and truth is necessary, does perhaps that make, because it is necessary, does that make Does that make love true? If so, love has nothing to do with volume or output. Yes. It is. And it is pure intensity. But I can wait. I can wait. At the end of the fence. When active, when doing things, time or duration become relative to the activity. Time engages and becomes about something, but not itself. Activity is time's forgetting itself. Occupied by details, engaged in transits and exchange. Time in action sooner or later arrives at interpretation, that is possibility. Consequently, however, does that not mean that waiting is similar to the experience of time itself? Waiting is time turned on itself, time transformed into self-referentiality. I'm wondering, is that time becoming objective? Waiting is to experience objective time. Waiting is to experience time's anonymity. And if anonymity is the absence of possibility in favor of necessity, does that mean that waiting is the experience of the necessity of time? But maybe the opposite is also possible. Waiting is when time becomes fully subjective. It's only a pure experience. Phenomenological time, purely subjective, since it doesn't stand in relation to anything else. The cigarette then is a way of offering waiting a relation, and hence waiting is easily overcome. But if waiting, on the other hand, is objective, no cigarette is required, since waiting transformed to a stretch of contemplation, anxious anticipation being exchanged for indifference and letting go, or in other words, of becoming anonymous. I can wait. I can wait. And no one can show me the way. There's no doorman. And no one comes back to open. But maybe it is already open here at the end of the fence. It's that just we've grown so accustomed to there being doors that we have forgotten that openness is altogether something different than open. After all, openness, like forgiveness, is looked after. And to be open is to share dressing room with forgetting. When we hold hands, even just casually on the street, does it necessarily have to signify belonging and communicate confirmation, through which together is strong? Perhaps holding someone's hand can equally function or exist as a means to stand together, however little we have in common, however anonymous we are to each other. Even though I don't know your name, or maybe especially because I don't, we can hold hands open. Open without forming bonds. Remaining anonymous, yet here. To hold hands, to offer oneself or ask for one's hand to be held, implies to give oneself up, to surrender and depart from transaction. And there's no details. The end of the fence, no details that bring us together or keep us apart. And things are what they are, which, however, is far from anything neutral. Perhaps even exactly because of this, it's another of those moments that can't be forced, precisely because they can't, are necessary.